Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and give some other registrants another minute or so, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. We're really excited to have you all and share these new enhancements that Matt has been working on over the last several months. So I will go ahead and pass it to Matt and we'll go ahead and get started. There will be a brief survey at the end of the webinar. If you could just take a couple minutes to complete the survey, we'd really appreciate your feedback on that. And then certainly everyone is in listen only mode, so everyone is on mute, but there is a questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and put them in that questions box. And if we see them during the webinar, we'll go ahead and answer them. Otherwise, we'll just keep them to the end and get them answered then. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Glad to be here today. I know the KPI functionality for the past year or two since Envision has been around has been something we've wanted to take a look at and improve. And we've done a heavy investment of time and resources over the last couple months, and excited to be here to share some of that with you guys. Make sure you fully understand how it's supposed to work and how to best implement it. So I echo what Lindsay said. Feel free to ask any questions or comments into the chat window. We'll do our best to answer anything for you as we go along the way here or before the webinar ends. And if we don't have time, we'll obviously reach out to you personally with those answers. So we got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive in here. Lindsay, everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so we're going to dive in here, and I want to kind of start from the basic, the beginning of creating a plan and how this new KPI functionality affects the plan structure. So from my dashboard here, I'm going to create a new strategic plan. Step one here, I'm just going to go ahead and create my plan name. Nothing on this step has changed. Still, I just name the plan and add the users. So I'm going to click next. So from here, I want to take a chance to review what's changed on this plan structure screen and kind of go through the levels here just as a refresher, because sometimes I think some of our newer clients, this can be a little bit confusing to start. So when we look at our structure here, the highest level, we have our strategic plan. So that's our overall plan. That's where the mission, vision, and values are going to live. And then as we scroll down that first level, we're going to see our segments. Some people might ask like what a segment is. Really, a segment is just a category. It's a strategic bucket, if you will, of what you want to cover or be able to see the health of as you execute your plan. So think of it as a strategic category, a folder, a bucket, just something simple as a container of breaking down your plan into high-level buckets and being able to see the health of those buckets along the way. As we go down here, we're going to see strategy under segment. So strategies, how am I going to accomplish the goals in those buckets? What are the specific groups of actions or broad actions that I'm going to do to accomplish my segment? So with Envision, the flexibility is pretty unique, where you can control how many strategies you want to implement. How many strategies does a segment take? You might have a segment that has 2 strategies where another segment might have 5 strategies. So it's kind of up to you of how you simple or complex you want to track things and break things down depending on your plan. So the top level here, when I looked at the segments and strategies, those are always required in Envision when you're creating your plan. So you always have to have at least 2 levels of those kind of categories or buckets before you get down to what we're going to talk about in a second of those strategic activities. So as I go down here, you're going to notice under objective here, I have optional hierarchy. So the objective level is only used if you have a strategy that needs to be broken down further. So you might have strategies in your plan that might have objectives, but you might have another strategy that has no objectives. So as we look at some stuff later on when you're navigating and creating stuff in the plan, it's kind of a choose your path, if you will. So once you skip the objective level once under a strategy, you won't be required to use an objective. So it kind of controls or allows you to control how complex or simple you want to get in regards to the layers. So those top layers there, the segment strategies and objectives, again, are the buckets. Those are the categories, things you want to see broken down. Now, when I get down to the strategic activities section, this is where one of the major changes that I want to make sure we call out came into play here. So strategic activities, when I look at it, I'm going to start over here on the right with our action items and KPIs. So action items is something that Envision has always had. Those are the things that you're doing, the actions you're taking and reporting on and doing your strategic journaling. So those are where you're going to do your progress notes on a weekly, monthly basis to keep your executive team or board up to breast on what you're doing and how you're doing it and what you're planning on. So the action item is subjective in nature, meaning if I'm working on an action item, I can choose that this feels red to me, this feels yellow to me, or I think this is green, it's on track, and that's going to be reported up through the health structure of your plan. The ability to have a KPI live next to an action item or at that same level is something that was just released in the July release. So that's something that's kind of a major milestone in regards to allowing you to more accurately and efficiently track what you're doing in regards to your execution and really setting some targets and measures and allowing for those measures to kind of drive the health of the plan along with those action items. So these KPIs that we're looking at next to the action items, we're going to reference those as our Plan Kpis. So you're going to hear me often reference today Plan Kpis, and that's what it means. It lives next to an action item or at that action item level and is directly related or created underneath a strategy or objective. And then we'll just briefly cover the tactic. So a tactic is really a group of action items or KPIs. So again, how simple or complex do you want to get with what you're doing? So if you have a complex strategy that you need to break down into more layers, you can use that tactic level to add another layer of what you're tracking. And then obviously under a tactic, you can have action items or KPIs. And I think the beauty here is you can have, if you only want to use measures, you can only use KPIs. You don't have to use action items. Or if you don't want to use measures, you can only use action items, or you can use a combination of both. So that flexibility, I think, is kind of a game changer for what we're doing in regards to what some of our competitors do. And I think it just provides that flexibility, as every plan is not the same, every strategy is not the same, and you can treat it differently throughout your plan the way you create it. As I scroll down here, you're going to see what we refer to as global activities. So Envision has always had, in one sense, an ability to create a KPI. And we'll talk about the different types of KPIs, but it's always had a KPI functionality, but that KPI has always lived outside of the plan structure. So we call that our global KPI now. So up here, we're going to reference as a Plan Kpi. Down here, this is a global KPI. And if I follow the arrow from here up, that simply means the global KPI exists outside of the plan. So it's not linked to a strategy, it's not directly impacting a strategy, but it's a high-level KPI that lives outside of the plan, still impacts your plan health, but it's something that's probably more high-level that spans an organizational goal, a high-level goal that's different than a plan goal or a Plan Kpi that is specific to a strategy. So that's the two main differences between the KPIs. And as we dig in here, you're going to see that no matter if I'm creating a KPI at the plan level or the global level, the KPI functionality that I'm allowed to use is going to be the same within that. I'm not going to cover the critical success factor here. That's probably a webinar in itself that we'll do down the road. But I just wanted to point out on the screen. And another thing before we move on here is a lot of times customers want to change the terminology, and you can change the terminology whatever it best fits how you lay out your plan. So if I click this pencil next to key performance indicator, Sometimes people might call key performance indicators milestones. So if I change that there, if I could spell today, it's going to change it in both locations. So essentially, I've now have plan milestones versus global milestones. And you can click that pencil and change the title or terminology throughout all these levels here. So I'm going to change that back to KPIs here real quick. All right. Hey, Lindsay, do we have any questions on this? I know this is sometimes a confusing step, so I don't know if we have any questions in the chat.
Not so far.
Great. All right, so I'm going to click next and move past this step. This step in the plan creation wizard is the same. Nothing has changed here. This is simply where I fill in the vision, mission, and values. Again, I'm probably like a broken record, but this is a point of flexibility again, where I'm not required to enter a vision, mission, and values at this point. This is something I can skip if I'm struggling with it. Something to point out here too is throughout the software, you're going to see some click here to learn more links, and those links will help you formulate or think about how to craft a vision statement or a mission statement or whatever you're trying to create. And those help links are created by Andrea Gibbs, our strategy execution executive, that does some excellent services for us. So they're very valuable with information. And if you find it valuable, you could even reach out to her for a free conversation if you're really struggling on how to craft your plan. So again, the flexibility here, I'm just going to skip through it at this point because I don't need to fill it, but again, I can fill it in later on. All right, so now I'm at the step here where we're going to take another moment to review what's changed. So step 4 of the plan creation wizard is where I build my plan. So right now I don't have anything here, so I'm going to use this plan builder to go through a couple different levels. So if I click add new, this is something that's a little bit different as you create your pieces of the plan, your entities, if you will. You'll often hear us refer to them as entities. So I haven't had anything created, so I'm creating the first layer of the plan, which based on the previous step 2 we showed is a segment. So I'm just going to create a segment here, and I'm just going to call it segment 1. Again, you assign your owner, your target state, what the end goal of this segment will be. And then I can do any tags, and tags, think of those are just additional ways to categorize or create buckets of information that you'll be able to simply look up or get to through a quick, easy search later on. So I'm going to click save here to save that segment. And then under segment 1, I have another add new button. And that's going to tell me, okay, at this step, you're creating a strategy. And I'm going to call it strategy 1. This is the target state. And you'll often hear us say target state. It really just means, what is this thing going to look like when it's done? What is the end goal? What is the purpose of me doing this? So that's just different ways to think about it. So you'll notice that segments and strategies, like we talked about earlier, are just buckets. They're categories, they're folders. So the fields between a segment and a strategy are exactly the same. You're just creating another bucket of information and ways to categorize. So I'm gonna hit save there. So now under the strategy, when I click add new, this is kind of the choose your path point that you can choose how simple or complex you need this part of the plan to be, or this strategy to be. So I can create an objective, which if I do that, again, I'm going to have the same fields that I had on a segment and a strategy. So it's just that category level. If I hit back here, I can choose action item or KPI. So the ability to create a KPI at this point, if I choose it, this is going to be a Plan Kpi because I'm creating it underneath that strategy. So I'm just going to choose KPI here, and from here you're going to see that we're going to get into our Kpi Wizard. So before I get further into this, I just wanted to highlight that before you couldn't create a KPI during the plan creation process. Now it's a little more intuitive, allows you to create it during the plan creation process. And again, the beauty of Envision is if there's things that you missed or things that you need to add over time, you'll be able to add it outside of this plan creation wizard And that's what I want to cover next. So I'm going to jump out of here, and then we're going to dive into creating a KPI and getting into the different types of KPIs. All right, so now I'm back to my dashboard. I'm going to dive into my Scoops demo plan here. All right, so from here, I want to cover how would you create a Plan Kpi after the fact. After my plan's built, as I'm navigating through the plan, I realized I forgot something. I need to create a KPI. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to scroll down, and I know I want to navigate down into my products segment. And something you're going to notice here too is one of the changes we made is on the screen, you're going to be able to see what you're looking at. So I can tell up top here again that I'm looking at a segment, and then down here, these are my strategies. So I know this operation strategy has 3 things that live underneath it. I'm going to click into it. So again, I see my strategy up top here now, and then down below here, I'm going to see those strategic activities. So I have action items, I have tactics on this grid here. So if I click add new now, again, I'm going to get that wizard that's going to basically tell me what my options are and explain to me what I can create. So it's defaulted to an action item. You notice I can't create an objective because we've already skipped the objective under this strategy. So it's not going to let me create an objective. It wants me to create some more strategic activities. So under action item or KPI, I'm going to choose KPI again. And this KPI Wizard was something we introduced back in, I believe, February in the release that makes it a little bit easier to understand all of the different configurations that you can do inside of a KPI. So this is a Plan Kpi is my name. Why, the target state might be what am I measuring and what is my overall target for this KPI. And again, I can put some tags in here. And I'm going to click next. And now here's a step where we're going to spend a little bit of time talking through what these different types are. So originally, Envision had one type of KPI, which is now known as our static KPI. So you might ask, like, why would I use a static KPI, or when would that be a good, useful measurement tool to use? So a static KPI is something where, for simplicity purposes, let's just think about a monthly KPI or something I'm going to measure each month. A static KPI is something where that target is going to remain the same across every month. Think of it as almost like a baseline, something that I know should remain the same over each month, and I'm going to measure my health against what I'm going to enter or what I've performed with each month. So as I scroll down here for my static, I'm going to choose what am I measuring? Is it a number? Is it currency? Is it percentage? Let's say it's a percentage today. Again, update frequency is, I'm going to talk about monthly, but we do have other options, and this is just how often you're going to be required to enter data to measure your execution. So at the plan level here, I'm just going to choose monthly. Update reminder is where we talk about a little bit about leading and lagging indicators. So update reminder is, do I want to enter the value or the data point for the KPI at the beginning of the month, or do I want to enter it at the end of the month? Most KPIs in nature are probably going to be lagging, but we do have the flexibility here to allow you to enter a leading indicator where at the beginning of the month you would enter what your data point is, and it would instantly obviously measure your health against that data point at the beginning of the month. I'm going to do last day of the period for right now. And then start period and target period. So start period is when do I want to start measuring, and target period is really the end period. When do I want to stop measuring this? When is this measurement going to be no longer effective to what I'm doing? So I'm going to leave this as October, which is going to give me 4 months between July and October. And my target value is 100. I'm going to leave that as 100 right now for simplicity purposes, but you can override that target to whatever you needed it to be. As we scroll down here, the threshold parameters, so you're going to first see range of measure. So we have a ascending and descending in between. So what these mean is if I leave it on ascending and my target value is 100, it means I'm working my way up from the bottom to 100. 100 is, I'm always going in the positive direction. I'm always working upwards. A good example for us internally might be support response times. In our support agreement, we agree upon that, hey, if you submit a support ticket, we're going to respond within 4 hours every time. So we might have a KPI that's measuring how many times didn't we, meet that expectation, or how do we fall short in that agreement. So this might be, we might want to hit 100% every month that we respond within 4 hours. So down here, it's going to say, within 90% to 100%, it's going to consider it green. Within 70 to 90%, it's going to consider it yellow, and then anything outside of that's going to be red. For our purposes, that's probably not up to our standards. So we want to move that and say, hey, anything within 97 to 100%, we're going to consider green. So we're going to give ourselves a 3% variance from the target and consider that green. And then I can do the same for the red area as well. So anything outside of 90% is just unacceptable. It's going to flag that as red. So again, this is, the static is a good baseline. Another example for maybe descending would be in the product management world, I'm always thinking about the quality of the software, how many defects we might have, the quality of our releases. So I might use a descending here where I want 0 defects or bugs each month that is found by a customer, which is probably unlikely, but that's my stretch goal. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be measured on, is 0. I want 0. So I'm working my way down in the number of defects down to 0. So from here, it's going to basically say my target value is 0. I'm working downwards. So now you can see that, like, if I slide this over here, I'm going to be green if I have less than 5 defects every month. And then I'm going to be red if I have less than 10 defects a month. So just a little bit explanation there between the differences, the differences of ascending versus descending. We do have an in-between measure. This would be if I want, let's say, the target value to be 20, and it's going to be good or bad, or it gets worse the further I get from 20. So in this example, if 20 is my target, anything between 18 and 22 is going to be considered green. And then obviously anything in that yellow range between 14 and 18, 22 and 26. So I have a target, but the further I get away from that target on both the negative and positive side is going to skew or flag it as red or yellow. So again, static, it's a good baseline option for those measurements that are always going to remain static, hence the name static is what we called it. So this is our KPI that we've always had. This one is available to all of our subscribers, so it doesn't depend on your subscription level. We're going to jump over here to the linear KPI. So linear KPI is, linear and stepped are both professional level subscriptions. So if you're an essentials customer, you wouldn't have access to these. But we're obviously still going to go through them today. So if you're interested in upgrading your subscription, if you are an essentials customer, you can reach out to support or send Lindsey a message in the chat, and we'll reach out to you and let you know what that looks like. But a linear KPI is something where I'm going to work towards a long-term target. So think about in this example here where we have this text, I want to sell 1,000 units this year, but I want to see the progress each month towards 1,000 units. I don't want to wait if I'm starting in January and I'm working towards a goal for the end of the year in December. I don't want to have to wait till December to realize, oh, like something went wrong and now it's too late to make a course correction. So a linear KPI is something that a good example is an annual sales target or annual revenue target, where you know where you want to be at the end of the year, but I want to see by each month how I'm progressing towards that end goal. So just like static, we have the same fields and configuration here where I can choose what I'm measuring. So I'm going to choose, let's say, numeric, and then update frequency I'm going to leave on a month. And then I'm still going to do my lagging indicator at the last day of the period. And then for my purposes here, I'm just going to leave July and October alone. And I'm going to start at 0. And let's say I'm going to go to 1,000. So if I scroll down to the threshold parameters now, you're going to notice that ascending and descending are grayed out. So based on being at 0 here and working up to 1,000, it knows I'm working from an ascending order. It knows I'm going from 0 to 1,000. If I had 1,000 in the starting value down to 0, it would automatically flip it to descending. So that's something that the system automatically knows for you, so you don't have to worry about that. But as I scroll down here, what you're going to see is it knows in July that I'm starting at 0 and I want to get to 1,000 by October. So it's giving me 4 months, and it's basically telling me, okay, across those 4 months, you need to do, on the average, you need to do 250 each month. So you're going to see here that for each month, 250, and then overall target progress, at the end of July, I'm going to be at 250. At the end of August, you should be at 500. End of September, you should be at 750, and then end of October, you should be at 1,000. So the system is smart enough to kind of take your goal and tell you where you should be. If something were to change, you can click in here and override that if you needed to, or down the road when you're setting this up in July, but in October, maybe you need a bigger goal, you can change that 250 to 400 at that time. So again, the flexibility of not being, you're gonna somewhat define your targets now, but it's okay if you don't know, you'll always be able to override them later. And again, this health tolerance, it'll be our default range here, but I can change it. And you'll notice down here, it's gonna update automatically. So I'm gonna set the health threshold based on percentage from my target. And then it's gonna show me based on that percentage set up here, it's gonna update each range here and tell me based on that range where I should be. And once we actually look at one that's set up, it'll be a little bit easier to understand here. So linear is good at working towards, a good example, like I said earlier, is a annual goal, but you're tracking your progress on a monthly basis. That way you're able to make course corrections. You're able to notice that in March, I'm not gonna meet my goal at the end of the year. So what do I need to do to correct? What kind of resources or capacity do I need to change? So it allows you to monitor your execution in more real time and make more quicker informed decisions based on your long-term goals, but also measuring on a short-term basis. The stepped KPI, when we talk about it, is very similar to static, where you're measuring, again, we're going to talk monthly, you're measuring each month towards a goal, and you're measuring your performance towards that monthly goal and your monthly performance, but you're allowed to have a goal or a target that changes each month. So again, when I look at the options here, we have numeric currency percentage, you have your monthly, you have your reminder, you have your periods, and then as I go down here, your targets are 0 right now, which again, you don't have to fill them in right now if you don't know them, but maybe I know that it's 200 for July, maybe it's 400 in August, maybe it goes back down to 300 in September, and maybe I don't know what October is today. But me, I'm a big golfer, so a good example of a way to think about why I would use stepped instead of static is, golf up here in the northern climates, the weather in April may not be as good as the weather in July. So if I'm measuring maybe my rounds of golf in April are going to be, I'm going to have a smaller target than I would for July or vice versa. So it allows you to set targets for each specific month because you might have seasonal impacts, you might have cyclical impacts where based on the nature of your business, you're busier in certain months than you are in other months or whatever period, quarters you choose to measure. So when I go back here and look at these again, we'll just review them. Static is where my target always stays the same. Cannot change that target. Remains static over time. Linear is I'm working on a line towards an end goal, hence the name linear. So again, that sales example where I'm working all year, each month towards an annual target. And then stepped would be where my monthly targets might change based on a variety of factors. So I'm gonna go ahead and exit out of here real quick. And what we're gonna do is look at, if I click into reduce cost of goods sold here, which is a tactic, it's got 4 things underneath it. We're gonna look at what it's gonna look like when I have KPIs and action items live at the same level here. So real quick, we have our action items, we have KPIs. I can see that this KPI I've already got set up. It tells me what type of KPI it is, says it's static. You'll see the card changes. It's a little bit different than the action item cards. We do have new filter options on this screen that allow you to choose what you want to view. So if I only want to view action items, I can choose action items. If I only want to view KPIs, I can choose to only view a KPI. And then the same thing with grid view, as you can see the action items and KPIs living together in a grid. So it goes back to that flexibility option where you can have KPIs and action items live together. You can choose to have only KPIs. You can choose to only have action items. Again, you control based on when you hit add new, you're going to be able to control what you're creating, and you have the flexibility to own that creation process. All right, so we're going to hop back to our Kpi dashboard. And from here, we're going to talk about both plan and global KPIs and how this view on this dashboard can change based on what you want to look at. So I'm going to choose, we'll go back to our card view here. So on the KPI dashboard is where I can view both global and plan KPIs together. This is going to be a universal view of all the KPIs I have set up in the system. You're going to notice as I scroll down here, you're going to see a indicator in the upper right corner of each card. The globe is going to represent a global KPI. And then as we see some plan KPIs, you will see the plan icon in the upper right corner. So just an easy way to let you know visually what you're looking at. Again, on these card views, it's going to show you what type of KPI it is. So it's going to let me know if it's a static, stepped, and then there are some linear examples in here as well. So let's go ahead and jump into what, now that we've set up some KPIs, what they look like when you actually dive into them. So this is a static KPI that I'm looking at here. And as I scroll down, some of the other changes that you're going to notice are these different charts. The ability to have different charts is an enterprise level feature. So again, one of those things that your subscription level may not have it. But if you're interested in upgrading, go ahead and reach out to us either through the chat or through a support ticket, and we'll get back to you on what that looks like. So from here, I can choose line chart, bar chart, whatever one I want to be the default view for when I log in here. I can toggle this as my default chart. Anybody that comes in and looks at this KPI, whatever is the default is the chart that they're going to see as they first come in here, but they would be able to select line chart if they didn't want to look at the bar chart or they wanted to look at it differently. Something as you scroll down here is the data point grid was something that we cleaned up and added as well. So from the data point grid, if you're curious on where the things fell in regards to the range, so 15 fell in the yellow and I can see how close it was to being green or red. So it just allows you from this view here to quickly analyze and see what may have went wrong. And another thing to note here is we talked about strategic journaling with KPIs. Don't forget, you can also do strategic journaling with, strategic journaling with the action items. Don't forget, you can also do the strategic journaling with KPIs. So I think it's important to note that it's not just about entering a data point. It's about taking time to think about, like, what is this data point telling me? Is it telling me that I'm successful, and how do I keep up on that success? Is it telling me that things might be going off track and I need to keep an eye on it? So think about how to flag or communicate to your upper level managements about what you're doing or what you're thinking in regards to how to keep this thing on track or how to get it back on track, or simply ask somebody for help. So don't forget about the progress notability when you're adding data points as well. So I'm going to switch back to the dashboard here, and I'm going to go into a linear KPI. All right, so linear KPI is something, this chart when we talked about, I want to work towards an end goal, but I want to see where I'm at on a monthly basis. So this will allow you to kind of see where you're projected to end based on your up-to-date performance. So when I look at this chart here on the line chart for linear, there is a projected progress. So based on my progress so far to date, if I continue on that same type of average, this is where I'm going to end up, is the blue. And it might be hard to see on top of that one, but you can see there that I'm able to click the lines that I do not or do want to see on these grids, which is again another level of flexibility that we allow you to define what you want on these charts that you're going to use to do some analysis. So the projected progress is on the kind of green line. So I know, in June, or I had a rough start in April, had a good June. So based on that kind of up and down performance, I'm still on target to finish where I should to meet my goals. If this blue was very much below the green target line, then I would know, whoa, I need to correct something, and it's early enough in the year that I can correct it now and get things back on track before the end of the year. All right, so let's go ahead and cover one thing we haven't touched yet. Well, actually, Lindsey, probably a good chance to see if we have any questions so far.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Just when you're deciding to put in a KPI, what is a good way to think about whether it should be at a plan level or a global level?
That's a good question. I think when we look at global and plan KPIs, it's really how close it is to the high level goals of the organization or the plan, or how close it is to the strategy. So I'll look at some of my notes here, but a global KPI, I think, is about monitoring the progress towards your overall execution. It's aligned with your mission, vision, and values. It's something that's probably maybe not measured more than a quarterly or annual basis. Maybe monthly as well, but there are options to measure things on a weekly basis. But those weekly or monthly measures probably are more planned KPIs. So I think it's really about thinking about it strategically. So a planned KPI is going to fit into my strategy. So a planned KPI is something that a lower level manager might own and is important to them operationally on a weekly or monthly basis, but it may not be important enough that the executive team thinks it's something that's high level, that's going to allow them to high level steer the ship, or important enough for them to look at or monitor, but it's something that in order to achieve your goals or your part of the plan, that it's something that's important to me. So I think it's kind of you need to ask the question, like, who's the audience, and is this KPI just important to me and the things that I'm responsible for, or is it important to the overall success of the plan? Kind of where it fits in that puzzle. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Lindsey, based on your interaction with helping customers build their plans.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Matt. And it goes to what you just said. Who is your audience? Who is looking at that? Maybe in my segment within customer success, certainly that response time KPI is something that I want to affect the overall health of how I'm doing in my specific segment. Yes, my leadership is interested in making sure that I'm responding to customers in a timely manner, but they may have, when I think of global KPIs, it's just, again, like that overarching, there may be more broad business goals or metrics that they are interested in, not saying that they're not interested in what I am tracking as far as response time. They're all important and all, leading and funneling into the health of the plan. But again, just thinking about who, is going to be looking at this metric. So.
Yeah, and I think too, if you think about like process or activities, like those, the plan KPIs are more about the process, the things that you're doing along the way, where a global KPI is probably more maybe finance related or a specific growth metric. It's nothing tied to a process of what you're doing, but ultimately maybe a combination of multiple processes that are going to get you to that high level KPI. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, one more question before we move on, Matt. Will we be able to export the KPI analytics into other platforms like spreadsheets, such as Smartsheets, Google Sheets, Excel, Numbers?
It's a good question. I don't know if we've really figured out if or when we would deliver that type of functionality in regards to an export. You know, we do have some stuff planned for later this year, which is going to make it a little bit easier to navigate around the system. And then on top of that, it'd be a little bit easier to work with the data through some interactive views that we're thinking about creating. So I think views and not necessarily reports, but different ways to look at the data, some robust filtering inside of the application is something that's on our radar, and we'll even be doing some focus groups. So, you know, I don't know if the person that asked that question would be a good candidate to possibly include in some of those focus groups or those discussions we do, but ultimately we try to make it as easier to do everything in Envision than have to take data from Envision and outside and take it outside to do something with it. So that's definitely something we can think about and work with in regards to what they're trying to do with the data in the other system, and figure out if there's a way that we can allow them to do that inside of Envision. That way they don't have to use two different platforms to do one thing that maybe doesn't only serve them a benefit, but could benefit all of our customers at the same time.
Great, thanks, Matt. That's all we've got for now.
Cool. So let's go ahead and dive in while we have a little bit more time here on something we've kind of just brushed over is our advanced calculation KPIs. So I'm going to go back to the key performance indicator dashboard here. And something to point out too, which I don't think I covered, I kind of glossed over, is when you're on this KPI dashboard, we haven't touched the ability to create a global KPI. So real quick before we jump into advanced calculation, anytime you create a KPI from this dashboard, this is going to be a global KPI. So it's not tied to a strategy. I'm not building it under a strategy or objectives. That's how I know the difference between a plan and a global KPI. So just something to note there, that anytime I create a KPI from the dashboard, it's going to assume that it's a global KPI. Anytime I create a KPI under a strategy or objective, that's always going to be a plan KPI. But let me go ahead and add new here again. And let's just call this advanced. And again, I'm just going to skip over for time purposes these other fields. And when I'm here, what we're going to see here is I still have my KPI type, so I'm going to choose linear for this example here. And we have this advanced calculation toggle. So if I look at this hint here, it's going to tell me that advanced KPIs will allow you to use other KPIs as data sources and combine them to perform advanced operations, such as sum, average, difference, and others, in order to track more complex metrics. What does that mean? In simple terms, it allows you to use other KPIs that you've already implemented and kind of twist and turn them into using formulas into creating another metric from that output. So this is an enterprise level feature. So if it's not accessible to you and you're curious about looking into what it would take to upgrade, go ahead and again reach out to us, and we'll let you know what that looks like. But I'm going to go ahead and toggle this on, and you're going to notice the screen updates and changes here. So from here, I've got my advanced calculation toggle on, and then I have a new pull down that we haven't seen yet for what type of operation do I want to do. So we won't go through these all, but you know, we have some difference, average, quotient. Quotient 2 is basically converting a ratio to a percentage. And then we do have the product operation, where you could take two KPIs and multiply them together if that operation was fitting for the metric you were trying to calculate. The easiest example usually that I would like to cover for advanced calculation is I want an overall sales target, let's say, but maybe I have regions within my sales organization or sales team that I want each region to have their own KPI and target, but then I want to see overall how are they combined doing together towards a high level overall goal. So I'm going to choose this sum operation here. And under these data sources, it's automatically going to start me with 2 data sources. And let's say I'm going to call this East. And then in this data source pull down, I can choose the East region KPI that I've already got set up. So something to note there too is before you create an advanced calculation KPI, you'd want to have the KPIs that you're going to use as data sources already created. So I'm going to add B here, let's say, and let's just call this West. So for time purposes, we'll just do 2 of these here. So I have an East region and a West region. So I'm going to be able to see how an East region is doing. I'm going to be able to see how a West region is doing. So my sales manager on the East is going to own that KPI. The sales manager on the West is going to own the West KPI. And then maybe the director of sales is going to own this KPI as I create it. You'll notice that these fields under the configuration are grayed out because the data sources that you're choosing are driving the configuration. So it makes it easier for you not to have to figure out or go look at the KPI and look at how it was set up to match any of the settings up. The system's automatically going to pull the configuration from your data sources for you automatically. So as I look down here and scroll down, I still have my health threshold parameters. I can choose my range of health here. But as I go down here, the range of health is applied to everything, but you'll notice I can't change the targets here. And that's simply because the targets are being driven from the data sources. So the system is already doing a calculation of adding the East targets with the West targets for me. Again, just making it easier for you to set these up and get moving fast. So I'm gonna cancel out of here. And we'll take a look at one of them that I already have set up here. All right, so I have this 2020 sales overall total. You're gonna notice a new icon on this card, not on the other cards, the advanced calculation icon. So again, just at a glance view, I can tell that this thing is an advanced calculation KPI. That is the sum. In this case, I know it's a sum of the data sources that it has set up in it, but ultimately you would know that this KPI is a operation or an output of a calculation. So I'm going to click in here to 2020 sales. As I look at this screen here, I'm going to see in the middle data sources. So it's going to let me know what data sources are driving this advanced calculation. So from here, I see my sales West region, my North region, my East region, and my South region are all data sources. As I scroll down, you're going to see your charts as well. Again, we have our linear chart here. I have a mixed chart. And then a new one for the advanced calculation is going to be the data sources chart. So from here, it's pretty cool and quick to see the performance of each region based on each month that I've looked at. So, looking at it gives me the key up here, but I can easily see that, in March, the North region has killed it compared to the other regions, where looking in April, the green region, which is the East region, has done very poorly. So maybe I need to, obviously, as the director of sales, I can now see that the East region is doing poorly. Maybe I need to give them more support or reach out and figure out what's going on to help them course correct. As you go down here, you're going to see as you add data points, it's going to have each for the data point or data sources here. If data sources are entered by the sales manager, like in the North and East region here, I can see that the North region manager has already entered his 1,200 total for the month. The East region has done the same, but the South and West have not. So maybe I need to reach out to them for them to make sure that they enter their numbers so I can take a full look at what this month of June was supposed to look like. Scrolling down here as well, we're going to see a summary tab, which is going to be the overall total that we talked about. So that's going to be my North, East, West, and South combined. It's going to show me what's going on here overall. Again, I still have my pop-ups. And then from there, I can click in and see how the West did, how the North did, how the South did if I need to. So from there, I can choose. From there, I can choose what I need to do proactively to reach out and maybe make a course correction. You can also, without leaving here, if I know I need to go look at the East region, I can click on the East region and not lose my place and go ahead and look at this. And maybe I say, look somebody up here. If I could type today. So it allows me to communicate, and then Mark's going to get a notification that I'm reaching out and I want to help him, and then we can go ahead and course correct from there. That's probably a good overview of the advanced calculations. I know that one is probably a little bit more complicated to understand exactly how all the operations work. So depending on how many questions or how many people are interested in that functionality, we could do another webinar just on the advanced calculation functionality down the road here. So I just want to finish with one more point. These KPIs, obviously, we have our KPI dashboard. You'll be able to see the KPIs as you navigate through the plan if you're looking for plan KPIs, but you can also customize or personalize your dashboard. So when you look at your specific dashboard, you'll notice that I have some Kpi Metric Widgets down here on the right. You can personalize your dashboard just like I have here. Add as many Kpi widgets as you want. You can add, it doesn't matter the plan, global or advanced calculations, whatever type it is, you can add a widget to help you monitor and keep track of that. So just take a step back, I hit that cube up here, add a widget. So I've added a Kpi metric widget. So now I'm going to close out. And I'm going to choose, let's say I want to look at this South Region 1. And now I have a South Region KPI in my dashboard. And if I click here, again, I can go ahead and move things around how I best see fit. So I think that's one of the kind of maybe missing things that people don't realize they can do on their dashboard is customize it, how they best see fit to manage what they're responsible for in the plan, or if they're a higher level, board member or executive, their dashboard's going to look very much different than what a lower level manager who's responsible for some execution might look. And I think that's a good stopping point, Lindsay.
I do have one question just regarding the advanced calculations. Do your data sources need to have the same range? For example, do they both need to be measured like on a monthly basis?
They do. So it'll require you, when you go to choose your data sources, the system is going to know that. Meaning, like, once you choose the first data source, the second data source you select will have to have the same frequency as the first one. So if I choose, I can actually jump back there. It's a good question. So let's just say static, and I do the advanced. When I choose the first data source here, so let's say waste reduction, when I choose the second one, you can't see that I'm clicking, but I can't click on monthly because waste reduction is a monthly frequency. So when I choose on the data source step B, it's only going to let me choose monthly KPIs that are static. So the system will kind of be smart enough to know and not let you cross that boundary, if you will.
Yeah, at this time, Matt, I think it's, if any other questions come to mind, certainly pop them in the questions box there on the GoToWebinar panel. We've had some really good questions, so thank you. And then certainly if you think of any questions after the webinar, reach out to myself or the support at MPOWR.com. And then if everyone could, I know we're wrapping up a little bit here, there is going to be a brief survey at the end. As soon as we end the webinar, it's just going to be like a 1-minute survey. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, we'd really appreciate it. But we'll take some more questions. All right, we got one. How do the KPIs reflect the health?
Very good question. Hopefully they're not talking about the reflection off my bald head. So KPIs reflect the health just like an action item would or anything would. So I think it's important to go back to, actually, let me go back here. So when we talk about the health of the plan, it's a really good question and something that we could probably reach back out to the person that asked the question, because we may not get it all done here in the next 4 minutes. But the health of the plan rolls all the way straight up. So when we talk about the plan structure under the strategic activities, your segments and strategies are basically going to be a sum of the health of what's below it. So if I have a strategy that has one action item underneath it, and that action item is green, that strategy is going to be green. If I have an action item that's green and a KPI that's flagged as red, the strategy is going to be a combination of the green and the red, so it's going to be yellow. The KPIs, when we talk about our health algorithm, do have a little bit more weighting to it. So when the measures are a little bit more important than the action items. But basically, when you look through the plan and you look through the sunburst, the plan health rolls all the way up. And then when we talk about the global activities, these don't necessarily filter into the plan structure health, but they are going to fill into the main health here. So let me hop back to the strategy overview. It might be easier to see from there. So when we talk about the health rolling up, basically, this is my strategic plan, overall Scoops strategic plan. So this is where the global KPI is going to feed into. This is where the critical success factors are going to feed into, along with all of these segments, strategies, and everything that's part of the structure. So again, when you look at the plan health, this outer ring here, which is all action items in this case, but these action items are defining what the color of those action items is feeding upwards into those strategies. And the same thing with KPIs. If I had KPIs, like in this example here, it's just going to feed straight up the ladder here into the plan health. I think that's what they were asking.
Yeah, I think so too, Matt. And then certainly, as you have your updates and you're putting your data points in, as those data points shift and you're doing well for a month, based on those parameters, that again is what's going to drive the health of that item or that
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah, exactly. So a quick example here, like this I'm looking at a tactic which has action items and a KPI underneath it. This tactic, I can't choose the color here, I can't choose the health here because it's a combination of everything below it. So it's knowing that it's red based on I have 2 reds and 1 green, and I have a KPI here which has a little bit more weighting than an action item. And again, when I look at this action item, it's red here because if I go to configure, based on these parameters that I've set and these ranges, when I enter a data point based on where it falls in the range for that month, that's how the health is going to be calculated. So if I look down here, the data point for this KPI for July was red. So I'm in the 50, it's red, right? But if I go ahead and let's say I'm going to go backwards and enter a data point for June, and let's say I enter 120. So you'll notice that June was green. So if I had looked at this KPI in June, it would have been green. Now in July, after I've entered my update, I know it's red. So the health is always going to reflect the most current data point entered. Or if you don't have a data point entered, this is a good point to make too. If you don't have a data point entered or you're missing a data point, the system's automatically going to flag that as red and count that as red because you're not up to date on your execution. So that's something to point out, that if you are late, you can't trick the system. The system's automatically going to say you're late, and it's going to flag it as red to your upper level management.
Yeah, thank you all for your questions and just your participation today. Matt, if you have any last comments or thoughts, but
Yeah, I don't. There was a lot to cover, so hopefully I didn't talk too quickly or speed it up. Probably could have been a 2-hour webinar. So
yeah,
if there's questions or we need to do another one of these, I think it's well worth it. There's a lot of stuff to add, a lot of stuff to understand how it works, and we just obviously want to make sure that our customers understand it and are able to utilize it to its fullest. And again, I think this was something long time coming in regards to the core piece of functionality that we were missing. So, I think we delivered a lot over the last couple months, and we're excited about what we're bringing over the next couple months. And it'll be good, I think, to do some focus groups and get a real understanding of. There's a lot of good guts and data that lives in Envision, but we may not have the greatest views today or be able to interact with that data. So I think that'll be a main point of concentration over the next couple months. And obviously we want to make sure that we don't put our head in the sand and deliver some views and ways to look at data that's not useful for what customers need. So it'll be critical to involve customers in that process and really get their feedback so we deliver really something that they can use and will be of value.
yeah. Thank you, Matt, very much. We will get the recording to everyone. So thank you and
Awesome.
have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.